Stop scrolling right now. What I am about to share could be the difference between watching your wealth disappear or protecting your financial future during the most aggressive trade war the United States has ever experienced. While mainstream media focuses on tariffs targeting cars, electronics, and everyday consumer products, one critical executive order quietly slipped past public attention. An order that fundamentally reshaped the precious metals market, especially for silver investors, collectors, and anyone who understands the concept of real money. This is not just another tariff headline. This is about a presidential decision that created a powerful exemption, essentially a golden pass, for one of the oldest and most trusted stores of value in human history. If you don't understand what just happened, you could miss one of the most important wealth preservation opportunities of this decade. I'm referring to Executive Order 346 and the amendments that led up to it. These decisions placed silver into a protected category while almost every other imported good was hit with heavy tariffs. And here's the shocking part. Most people have no idea this even occurred. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the Trump administration created this exemption, how it impacts silver prices, what it means for you whether you own silver or not, and most importantly, what actions you should consider taking right now. So buckle up. This is a deep dive into the executive order that changed everything. Before we break down the silver exemption that could reshape portfolios, you need to understand the chaos unleashed on global trade. When the president began this term, action was immediate. Within hours of the inauguration, executive orders were issued. Cabinet members were instructed to investigate trade practices, propose tariff structures, and redesign how America engages in global commerce. Then came the shockwave. Using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the administration declared a national emergency tied to trade deficits and rolled out what they called reciprocal tariffs. This wasn't a minor policy tweak. It was a blunt force move. A baseline 10% tariff was imposed on imports from nearly every country. But that was just the beginning. Some nations faced much higher penalties. Tariffs jumped to 20%, 30%, and in certain cases exceeded 100%. Chinese imports surged from 84% tariffs to as high as 125% before later being temporarily reduced. The European Union faced fluctuating rates between 20 and 50% depending on negotiations. Canada and Mexico were hit with 25% tariffs linked to border security and fentanyl-related concerns. The administration justified these actions by citing national security. They argued that massive trade imbalances, unfair foreign practices, and decades of one-sided trade agreements created an extraordinary threat to America's economy and security. Whether you agree or disagree, the orders were signed, the tariffs took effect, and global trade plunged into turmoil. Other countries responded immediately. Retaliatory tariffs from Europe, China, and additional trading partners followed. Supply chains were disrupted. Prices began to shift across industries. Steel and aluminum were struck with 25% tariffs under Section 232 national security investigations. Automobiles and auto parts faced similar treatment. Copper imports came under review. Pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and lumber were all threatened with steep duties. It seemed like nothing was protected. Every imported product would cost more. Except that wasn't entirely true. Hidden within these executive orders and their revisions was something unexpected, an exemption list. And on that list was a word that immediately caught the attention of the precious metals world: bullion. According to the official White House fact sheet, certain goods were added to a classification known as NX2, meaning they would not be subject to reciprocal tariffs. These items included bullion-related articles and select critical materials tied to bullion. In trade terms, bullion refers to gold, silver, platinum, and palladium in forms such as coins, bars, and ingots. Gold's exemption was clearly stated and undisputed. Silver, platinum, and palladium were included under the same bullion umbrella, creating a strong safeguard supported by market interpretation and expert analysis. The National Coin and Bullion Association quickly described this as a major win for the bullion and numismatic community. They confirmed that precious metals would remain tariff-free under the sweeping trade policies enacted through the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Now here's where things get interesting. Bullion wasn't exempted because policymakers favor precious metals investors. It was exempted because there was no alternative. The United States simply does not produce enough silver to meet domestic demand. The supply gap is massive. Silver isn't just used for coins or jewelry. It's essential for industrial production. Solar panels, electronics, medical equipment, batteries, water purification systems, and countless manufacturing processes rely on silver. If tariffs had been placed on silver imports, the impact would have been immediate. Industrial costs would have surged overnight. Manufacturers would have paid 10, 20, or even 30% more for critical raw material. Those costs would either be passed directly to consumers or crush corporate profit margins. At the same time, strengthening the dollar against physical silver would contradict the core purpose of tariffs. You cannot protect domestic production when the supply doesn't exist in sufficient quantity. Taxing an unavoidable import makes no economic sense, but there's a deeper layer most people overlook. This exemption isn't just about economics, it's symbolic. By placing precious metals in a protected category, shielded from tariff wars and trade disruption, the administration made an implicit statement. Bullion is different. It isn't just another commodity. It functions as money, a store of value, and a strategic resource that exists beyond normal trade rules. And this single decision has already triggered reactions in the precious metals markets that most investors haven't noticed yet. Once the bullion exemption was confirmed, market behavior shifted almost immediately. Premiums on platinum and palladium began to fall. Dealer markups over spot prices narrowed. Why did this happen? Because uncertainty vanished. With tariffs off the table, pricing became predictable again, tightening the gap between wholesale and retail. Silver, however, is a different story. Its role is unique. Silver exists at the crossroads of money and industry. It's bought by investors seeking protection, and it's consumed in massive quantities by manufacturers. Here's the paradox. While raw silver enters the United States tariff-free, many silver-containing products do not. Solar panels may face tariffs. Electronics imported from China certainly do. Medical devices depend on origin and trade agreements. This creates an unusual imbalance. The silver itself flows freely into the country, but finished goods containing silver can be heavily taxed when manufactured abroad and imported back into the US. Do you see the impact this creates? It builds a strong incentive for manufacturing to take place inside the United States. If you're a company deciding where to build a solar panel factory, this tariff structure just nudged you toward America. You can import silver without tariffs, manufacture panels domestically, and completely avoid tariffs on finished products. That is exactly the outcome the administration is aiming for. But it also signals something important. Domestic demand for silver is likely to rise sharply, and this is where supply and demand become critical. Global silver production has remained relatively stagnant for years. Major silver-producing countries include Mexico, Peru, China, Australia, and Russia. The United States does produce silver, but production levels fall far short of domestic consumption. Now add tariffs into the equation. If manufacturing shifts back to U.S. soil, industrial demand for silver could surge just as global trade tensions complicate supply chains. What happens when demand rises while supply remains limited? Basic economics takes over, prices move higher. But there is another layer investors must understand. Physical silver, the metal you can actually hold, has just become one of the most effective hedges in a tariff-driven economy. Here's why that matters. Tariffs increase the cost of imported goods, and higher costs lead directly to inflation. Consumers end up paying more for electronics, vehicles, building materials, and everyday products. Inflation steadily erodes the purchasing power of paper currency. Historically, precious metals have protected against this erosion. Silver, in particular, has long served as an inflation hedge. When paper money loses value, tangible assets tend to retain theirs. But silver now carries an additional advantage. It is explicitly exempt from the very tariffs that are fueling inflation. That creates a rare setup. You have an asset that historically protects against inflation. It may experience increased demand from reshored manufacturing. And it faces no added tariff costs that would normally reduce its appeal. That combination is powerful. There's also a currency dynamic unfolding beneath the surface. Trade wars introduce currency volatility. The dollar may strengthen against some currencies and weaken against others depending on negotiations and retaliation. Periods of uncertainty like this historically push investors toward precious metals. Gold usually dominates the headlines as the ultimate safe haven. But silver, often called the poor man's gold, offers similar protection at a lower entry point. Because silver's market is smaller, it also carries the potential for larger percentage moves. Now you might be thinking this only benefits silver investors. That assumption would be a mistake. This executive order affects everyone. Even if you never purchase a single ounce of silver, it still hits your wallet. Let me explain how. Silver is embedded in nearly every electronic device you own. Your smartphone contains silver, your laptop contains silver, your television, household appliances, and vehicle electronics all rely on silver. Many of these products are manufactured overseas, and many of them are now subject to tariffs, ranging from 10% to well over 100% depending on origin. The silver inside those products is tariff-free. But labor, assembly, and other components are not. That means prices are rising. The phone upgrade you were planning will likely cost more. That laptop replacement just became more expensive. Smart home devices, gaming consoles, and tablets are all affected. The only upside is that silver's exemption prevents prices from climbing even higher. Without it, the impact would be far worse. Solar energy is another critical area. Solar panels rely heavily on silver for their photovoltaic cells. Silver paste is essential for collecting and transferring electricity. It is also one of the most expensive components in solar manufacturing. As governments push for renewable energy and invest heavily in solar infrastructure, silver demand has surged. Some estimates suggest solar manufacturing could consume up to 20% of global silver supply within a few years. If silver had been tariffed, solar panel prices would have spiked dramatically. That would have slowed renewable adoption and increased electricity costs. The exemption keeps solar expansion economically viable, at least at the raw material level. But there is a catch. Many solar panels are currently manufactured in countries facing heavy tariffs. So while silver is exempt, finished panels are not. This is why companies are rushing to build solar manufacturing facilities in the United States. The tariff structure makes domestic production financially attractive. Healthcare is another major area affected by silver. Silver's antimicrobial properties make it essential in medical use. It appears in wound dressings, surgical tools, catheters, and countless healthcare products. With healthcare costs already extremely high, tariffs on medical supplies would have been disastrous. The silver exemption helps prevent that at the raw material level. However, medical devices manufactured overseas may still face tariffs. Once again, this pressures companies to manufacture domestically. Over time, that could stabilize or even reduce costs. In the short term, healthcare prices remain under inflationary pressure. The administration has consistently argued that tariffs are about jobs, bringing manufacturing back, protecting American workers, rebuilding the industrial base. The silver exemption supports this goal by lowering the cost of domestic production. When raw silver is tariff-free but finished imports are not, the math changes. That shift could lead to job creation in electronics, renewable energy, and medical manufacturing. But these changes take time. Factories are not built overnight. Workers require training. Supply chains must be restructured. Short-term disruption is unavoidable. Long-term success depends on execution. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Tariffs are inflationary. When imports cost more, businesses either absorb losses or pass costs to consumers. Most choose the second option. Prices rise. The silver exemption helps soften the blow by keeping a critical input stable. But inflation is still spreading across multiple sectors. For retirees and people on fixed incomes, this is especially painful. For workers whose wages lag behind inflation, it is effectively a pay cut. Purchasing power declines. This is why experienced investors are turning toward tangible assets like silver. It isn't about getting rich quickly, it's about preserving value. But there's another twist. The silver exemption did not occur in isolation. It is part of a broader strategic game involving America's trading partners. Understanding that strategy is key to predicting what comes next. These executive orders were not just about punishment, they were about leverage. The administration introduced a framework known as potential tariff adjustments for aligned partners, or the PTAP Annex. This framework acts as a list of product categories where reciprocal tariffs could be reduced if a trading partner reaches a favorable agreement with the United States. Think of it as a negotiation guide. If a country agrees to certain terms, tariffs on specific goods may be lowered. Several nations have already reached deals under this structure. Japan agreed to a framework that lowered its tariff rate to 15% and included a commitment of $550 billion in investment into the U.S. The European Union negotiated a 15% ceiling with carve-outs for aircraft, pharmaceuticals, and select natural resources. These agreements are actively reshaping global trade relationships in real time. Once you understand this leverage strategy, the precious metals exemption becomes far more logical. You don't impose tariffs on imports you fundamentally depend on. That isn't leverage. That's self-inflicted damage. The United States must import silver, gold, platinum, and palladium because domestic production does not meet consumption needs. By exempting these metals from the beginning, the administration sent a clear signal. The message was simple. We are serious about tariffs, but we are strategic. We will not unnecessarily damage our own industries or consumers. This approach actually strengthened the credibility of the entire tariff policy. It demonstrated economic reasoning rather than pure political posturing. Now we need to talk about China. China cannot be ignored in this discussion. It is both a major silver producer and the global manufacturing hub for silver-containing products. The tariff conflict with China has been the most aggressive. Rates surged as high as 125% before temporary reductions. Negotiations have gone back and forth, with retaliatory tariffs exchanged repeatedly. Silver sits directly in the center of this conflict. China supplies a large share of global silver production. At the same time, Chinese factories produce electronics, solar panels, and other silver-dependent goods for the global market. Because silver itself is exempt, raw silver from China can still enter the United States without tariffs. However, products manufactured with that silver in Chinese factories face heavy tariffs when exported to the U.S. This creates a unique dynamic. China can continue selling silver to the U.S., earning revenue from mining operations, but it loses competitiveness in higher value manufactured goods. The policy effectively penalizes manufacturing while acknowledging America's dependence on imported raw materials. There is also an important currency dimension that often goes unnoticed. Trade wars influence currency values. When tariffs reduce export demand, national currencies can weaken. When agreements are signed, currencies tend to stabilize. Precious metals are priced globally in US dollars, but their value exists independently of any single currency. That is why investors historically move into gold and silver during periods of currency instability. Trade wars naturally create this type of instability. The silver exemption ensures that this global flight to safety mechanism remains intact. Investors worldwide can still access silver without added US tariff costs. This preserves silver's role as a global store of value. There is another critical layer to this story: the executive order related to critical minerals. The administration launched a Section 232 investigation into processed critical minerals and their derivative products. This includes rare earth elements, lithium, cobalt, and yes, silver. Silver is officially categorized as critical to national security. Although silver was exempted from reciprocal tariffs, the fact that it remains under national security review shows how vital it is. The military relies on silver for electronics, missile systems, and advanced technologies. Renewable energy infrastructure depends on silver for solar panels. The medical sector relies on silver for antimicrobial applications. Electric vehicles require silver for electronics and electrical conduction. This is not just about coins and investment bars. Silver is a strategic resource. The tariff exemption ensures its continued availability for all of these essential uses. So far, we've covered why silver was exempted, how it impacts markets and the economy, and how it fits into the broader geopolitical strategy. Now comes the most important question. What does this mean for your money, and what should you actually do with this information? Let's strip away the noise and focus on the facts. Supply and demand fundamentals favor higher silver prices. Industrial demand continues to grow. Investment demand typically increases during periods of uncertainty. Supply growth remains limited. The tariff structure gives silver a unique advantage. It avoids costs that are hitting nearly every other commodity. That makes silver relatively more attractive. Inflation is likely to remain elevated as tariff effects spread through the economy. Silver has historically acted as an inflation hedge. Ongoing trade tensions create currency instability. That instability often drives investors toward precious metals. Manufacturing reshoring could significantly increase domestic silver demand. Does this guarantee silver prices will surge? No. Markets are complex and influenced by many variables, but the risk-reward balance has clearly shifted in favor of physical silver ownership. If you are considering adding silver to your portfolio, there are several approaches. Physical silver includes coins, bars, and rounds that you either hold yourself or store securely. The benefit is direct ownership of a tangible asset. The drawbacks include storage, premiums over spot price, and lower liquidity compared to paper assets. Common options include American Silver Eagles, Canadian Silver Maple Leafs, and generic rounds or bars from reputable mints. Silver ETFs are exchange-traded funds such as SLV that track silver prices without requiring physical handling. They are liquid and easy to trade through brokerage accounts. Transaction costs are typically lower than physical silver. The downside is that you do not own the metal itself. You own shares in a fund that holds silver. In extreme scenarios, counterparty risk exists. Silver mining stocks represent companies that extract silver from the ground. They can provide leveraged exposure to rising silver prices. When silver rises, mining profits may rise faster. However, this comes with company-specific risks and equity market volatility. Silver futures and options are advanced instruments designed for traders. They offer leverage but carry significant risk. They are not suitable for conservative long-term investors. Conservative investors may consider allocating 5 to 10% of a portfolio to precious metals. This is often split between gold and silver held physically or through established ETFs. Moderate investors might allocate 10 to 15% with a mix of physical silver, ETFs, and limited mining exposure. Aggressive investors may allocate more, include mining stocks, or use option strategies. But higher potential returns come with substantially higher risk. Here is an important detail many people overlook. The IRS classifies precious metals as collectibles for tax purposes. If you sell physical silver at a profit, gains may be taxed at rates up to 28%. This is higher than standard long-term capital gains rates applied to stocks. Silver ETFs often receive similar tax treatment. Mining stocks, however, are taxed differently as equities. Stocks, on the other hand, are taxed like normal equities. This alone is not a reason to avoid silver, but it is something that should be included in your planning. Some investors choose to hold precious metals inside tax-advantaged accounts such as IRAs. There are specific IRA structures that allow physical metals, while others simply plan to hold silver long-term outside taxable events. If you decide to buy physical silver, secure storage becomes essential. Small quantities can be stored at home in a quality safe. Larger holdings are better kept in bank safety deposit boxes or specialized precious metals vaults. It's important to understand that standard homeowners insurance usually offers very limited coverage for precious metals. Often, coverage is capped at only a few $1,000s. Additional insurance riders or specialized policies may be necessary. Another key decision is whether to buy silver all at once or spread purchases over time. This is the classic dollar-cost averaging dilemma. Buying gradually reduces the risk of entering the market at a peak. However, spreading purchases may cause you to miss gains if prices rise steadily. Given the current uncertainty around tariffs, trade negotiations, and broader economic conditions, many professionals recommend dollar-cost averaging. This means investing a fixed amount monthly or quarterly, regardless of price. This strategy removes emotion from decision-making and helps build exposure steadily. Now, before rushing into silver purchases, there are important risks and misconceptions that must be addressed. Let's be honest. If you're buying silver expecting to triple your money in 6 months, you're likely setting yourself up for disappointment. Silver is volatile. Prices can move sharply in both directions over short periods. The core purpose of owning silver is not short-term speculation. It is wealth preservation. Think of silver like insurance. You don't buy insurance hoping to use it. You buy it so you are protected if things go wrong. Silver serves a similar role within a diversified portfolio. Physical silver is less liquid than stocks or ETFs. You cannot instantly sell it with a mouse click at market price. You must find a buyer or dealer. You will likely lose some value to the bid-ask spread. Dealers buy below spot price and sell above it. This means silver must rise by a certain amount before you break even. ETFs solve the liquidity problem, but they introduce counterparty risk. There is always a trade-off. Professional storage of large silver holdings comes with ongoing fees. These are typically charged annually as a percentage of value. Unlike stocks that sit in brokerage accounts for free, silver generates no income. It simply incurs storage costs. That must be factored into long-term return expectations. There is also a long-running debate about price manipulation in precious metals markets. Some argue that large banks or government-linked institutions suppress silver prices to maintain confidence in paper currencies. Certain manipulation cases have been proven and fined. Other claims cross into speculative territory. Regardless of where you stand, one thing matters. If manipulation exists, silver may be undervalued relative to fundamentals. That could be bullish over the long term. However, it also means prices may not react quickly to supply and demand changes. This leads to a critical distinction. When you buy a silver ETF, you do not own silver. You own shares in a fund that claims to hold silver. In normal conditions, that distinction is mostly irrelevant. In a severe financial crisis, it becomes very important. At that moment, you are relying on fund sponsors, custodians, and the broader financial system to function properly. This is why some investors insist on physical ownership. They accept higher costs and lower liquidity in exchange for direct control. Every dollar invested in silver is a dollar not invested elsewhere. That includes stocks, bonds, real estate, or your own business. Historically, equities have outperformed precious metals over long time horizons. From a pure growth standpoint, broad stock market investors have generally done better than silver-only investors. But silver is not meant to replace your entire portfolio. It is designed to complement it. Silver acts as a hedge. It behaves differently than stocks and bonds. It provides diversification and insurance. No one can consistently time the silver market. Predictions of silver reaching extreme prices have circulated for decades. Some spikes did occur during crises, but timing those moments is extremely difficult. This is another reason dollar-cost averaging remains effective. It eliminates the need to guess market tops and bottoms. Now let's zoom out and bring everything together. We've covered the executive order, the tariff exemption, the economic implications, the investment case, and the risks. So where does all of this lead? Tariff-heavy trade policy is now embedded in the system. Deals may shift rates, but the overall framework remains. This means the forces that make silver relevant are not temporary. Inflation pressure, supply chain restructuring, and trade friction are likely to persist. Manufacturing reshoring will take years. Factories must be built, workers trained, supply chains rebuilt. During this transition, volatility and uncertainty are likely. These are the environments where precious metals historically perform well. Tariffs are inflationary by nature, that is economic reality. When imports cost more, prices rise. Central banks face difficult choices: raise rates too aggressively and risk recession, keep them low and inflation continues. Higher rates typically pressure non-yielding assets like silver. But persistent inflation changes that equation. When inflation outpaces interest rates, precious metals regain appeal. There's also a deeper issue beneath all of this: the role of the US dollar as the global reserve currency. Trade wars introduce friction into the global system. Countries facing tariffs seek alternatives. We are already seeing moves toward non-dollar trade settlements. If dollar dominance weakens even modestly, precious metals become more important. They function outside sovereign systems. Industrial demand for silver also has a strong long-term outlook. Renewable energy requires silver. Electric vehicles require silver. Advanced electronics require silver. Medical technology requires silver. Emerging technologies like 5G, AI hardware, and advanced manufacturing are silver intensive. At the same time, silver supply is slow to respond. New mines take years to develop. Production cannot be increased quickly. This imbalance between growing demand and constrained supply supports silver prices over the long term, independently of monetary speculation. Here's a perspective that doesn't get enough attention. We are currently experiencing the largest generational wealth transfer in human history. As baby boomers grow older and pass their assets to younger generations, the mindset of investors is changing. Millennials and Gen Z view assets very differently than their parents did. Many of them distrust traditional financial institutions. They are more open to alternative assets. They are also deeply concerned about inflation and the long-term value of the dollar. This shift alone could create powerful new demand for precious metals over the coming decades. That demand becomes even stronger if economic instability continues. We also have to recognize the possibility of major disruptions that could dramatically affect precious metals prices. Geopolitical conflicts could escalate and severely disrupt global trade. A financial system crisis could undermine confidence in paper-based assets. Government debt could spiral into a full-blown crisis as deficits continue to expand. A major currency shock could occur if the dollar's role as the global reserve currency is seriously challenged. Supply chain breakdowns could make physical commodities far more difficult to obtain. These events may be unlikely, but their impact would be enormous if they happen. Precious metals exist specifically to provide protection against these kinds of scenarios. Tax policies could also change in ways that influence precious metals investing. New regulations might increase reporting requirements for dealers or even restrict ownership, although that remains unlikely. Future administrations could significantly alter the current tariff structure. Trade agreements could reshape the entire landscape. Federal Reserve policy decisions, including money creation, balance sheet expansion or reduction, and interest rate changes, all directly influence precious metals markets. There are many unknowns ahead. That uncertainty is exactly why diversification matters. It is also why allocating a portion of your portfolio to assets like silver makes sense, even without perfect foresight. So where does all of this leave you after everything we've discussed? What is the real takeaway? Let's turn this into clear and practical guidance. Trump's silver tariff, or more precisely the exemption of silver from tariffs, reflects a strategic understanding that precious metals are not ordinary commodities. Exempting bullion from broad tariffs while taxing nearly everything else achieves several objectives. It acknowledges America's reliance on imported precious metals. It protects industries that depend on silver as a vital input. It preserves the role of precious metals as alternative stores of value during economic stress. It encourages manufacturing to return to the United States. Most importantly, it signals that even during an aggressive trade conflict, policymakers understand the difference between strategic leverage and self-inflicted harm. Silver is a tangible asset with industrial, practical, and monetary value. It is now officially exempt from tariffs that are raising costs throughout the economy. Supply remains tight. Demand from multiple sectors continues to grow. Inflation pressures are likely to persist. Economic uncertainty supports the case for safe haven assets. As a result, the risk-reward balance for owning silver within a diversified portfolio has improved meaningfully. Step 1 is to evaluate your current portfolio. Take an honest look at what you own. How much is allocated to stocks, bonds, cash, and real estate? Do you have any exposure to precious metals at all? Most financial advisors recommend allocating between 5 and 15% of a portfolio to alternative assets, including precious metals, depending on risk tolerance and time horizon. Step 2 is deciding your allocation. Based on your personal situation, determine what percentage belongs in precious metals. If you are older and more conservative, 5 to 8% may be appropriate. If you are younger with a longer investment horizon, 10 to 15% could make sense. Divide this allocation between gold and silver. Gold provides stability. Silver offers greater growth potential. Step 3 is choosing your investment vehicle. Decide whether you prefer physical metal, exchange-traded funds, mining stocks, or a mix. For many people, starting with an ETF such as SLV offers simplicity and liquidity. As confidence grows, physical holdings can be added over time. Step 4 is dollar cost averaging. Set up automatic purchases on a monthly or quarterly basis. This approach removes emotion and timing risk from the process. Even small contributions matter. Investing $100 per month into silver compounds meaningfully over time. Step 5 is secure storage if you choose physical metal. Have a security plan before making a purchase. A home safe may work for small amounts. Larger holdings should be stored in a safety deposit box or professional vault. Step 6 is record keeping. Save all receipts and transaction details. Track your cost basis for tax purposes. Keep records organized and secure. Step 7 is periodic rebalancing. Review your portfolio once or twice per year. If silver rises and grows from 10% to 20% of your portfolio, consider trimming the position. If it falls to 5%, you may consider adding. Step 8 is staying informed without becoming obsessive. Follow major developments in trade policy, monetary policy, and precious metals markets. Avoid checking prices every day. Do not make emotional decisions based on short-term price movements. Do not invest your entire life savings into silver expecting rapid wealth. Do not buy from unknown dealers without researching their credibility. Avoid collectible coins with high premiums when your goal is bullion. Do not panic sell during price declines if your original investment thesis remains valid. Do not neglect your broader financial plan, including emergency savings, retirement accounts, and debt management. Do not trust anyone who claims to know exactly where silver prices are headed. This tariff exemption teaches a critical lesson. Government policy plays a massive role in investment outcomes. The difference between taxing silver imports at 10 to 30% versus fully exempting them is enormous. It influences prices, demand, market structure, and investor returns. This is why staying aware of policy decisions and economic shifts matters. You do not need to become a policy expert. You simply need to pay attention to decisions that directly affect your money. The executive order exempting silver and other precious metals from tariffs is not a minor footnote. It is a major policy move with long-term consequences for markets, the economy, and individual investors. Whether or not you act on this information, understanding it makes you a more informed participant in your financial future. We are living through a period of profound economic change. Tariff realignments, inflation risk, supply chain restructuring, and geopolitical uncertainty are all unfolding at once. In times like these, holding a portion of your wealth in tangible, time-tested stores of value makes sense. Silver is not a miracle solution. It will not fix every financial problem. But, as part of a carefully constructed and diversified strategy, it has earned its role. The executive order is signed. The exemption is active. Markets are reacting. The real question now is what you choose to do with this information. Thank you for staying with me through this deep dive. If this video helped clarify a complex policy issue and its impact on your finances, share your thoughts in the comments. Are you thinking about adding silver to your portfolio? Do you already own precious metals? What is your strategy? If you found value here, make sure you are subscribed. We will continue tracking tariff changes, trade negotiations, and economic policies that directly affect your financial future. The landscape has changed. The order has been signed. Now it's your move.